Okay. Hearing the order, if you please join me for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the record, we have councilors Humbert and Weeks and Mayor Pro Tem Howe present, as well as myself, Mayor Lindsay. Moving on to the rankings of our projects as discussed previously in the June 3rd hearing. Manager Weir, do you want to speak to any of this?
Mr. Mayor, yes, so we had a departmental head meeting where we discussed the ICIP, the capital projects that the village is looking to prioritize for the new council. This is a required report that is requested from the state. It is used to prioritize appropriations from the state, both at the congressional and the governor level. This is also used in many state grants as a way of ranking projects that you may be looking to get grants on. Generally, the requirement is to be in either your top 5 or your top 10, depending on the grant. In order to obtain maximum points in a grant ranking process. So there are a lot of considerations that go into this. This is not just what's most important to us, even though that's a major factor. There are things that are taken into consideration, like other monies that we may have. So it's not just the importance of the project, it could be the importance of obtaining additional money and the amount of those monies. So there's a lot of consideration that goes into this that may not just be obvious in the ranking, and I want the public to know that this does not necessarily indicate what is most important to us. It is a better indicator of what we need outside resources to help us complete these projects. And with that said, I would like to have our project lead and grant writer and starting Monday, our CPO, Julie Colhan, to present to the council.
Thank you, Manager Weir. Mr. Mayor and members of the council and the clerk, the sheet I passed out to you, reiterates the discussion that we had at our previous July 9th public hearing. Lieutenant Strickland had brought up under number 8, the radio communications tower, that the chief Holgrove was looking at going to a satellite communications. Satellite communication is going to be the way of the future. I told you I would misspoke when I thought that Red River was ready for it. They're not, but Motorola just has to flip a switch. That's their extent for dispatch. Chief Holgrove did give me a brochure on the satellite company. However, I don't have any numbers. I don't have any cost estimates for that project. The items highlighted in yellow, those are funds that are currently encumbered or allocated for those projects. And I will stand for any questions or anything that the public may have, since this is a public meeting.
So question, are you saying that we have 100,000 set aside for that radio
We
communication?
received capital appropriations in $100,000 2 years ago. None of those funds have been expended towards that project.
Do we have any idea how much more it'll take?
I don't.
Okay.
So the estimates that I've seen are about the need for everything, because keep in mind, when you go to this, all your radios and everything have to be replaced. So the estimates I've seen have been in the 250 to 300 range.
Are you referring to the satellite?
Isn't that what he's
No,
asking?
he's asking about the radio communications tower,
Well,
how much funds we've received for that.
I know, but he's saying I'm sorry, I don't want to speak for you.
Right,
Mayor
yeah,
Pro Tem, but I thought you were saying to complete that project, how much more money would there
yes.
be?
That's just for the radio tower. Going to satellite communications would be a whole different appropriation because it's a different scope of work.
So the money that's been, the 100,000 that we have could not be used towards the satellite.
No, sir.
So I will tell the council that I had a conversation with Chief Hogriff on this just today. To go to satellite is, there are challenges associated with that, primarily because the Red River has just made a decision to go to digital. And the connect between the satellite and the digital is not an easy thing to accomplish. It may actually increase the cost of us going to satellite if we wanted to connect to their digital system. And
And when you refer to Red River, you're talking about the dispatch.
Red River Dispatch, so they made a choice recently to go to digital from their current analog system. And there are some challenges between digital and satellite that didn't exist between satellite and analog. So it could significantly increase the cost, and it actually, we're still working on it, but it may actually make our move to satellite not practical from a cost perspective.
Okay, thank you.
But if everything went through as normal, the numbers I've heard were between 250 and 300 for the entire project, which would include the satellite tower or the emergency radio tower and all the other equipment that would be needed in order to go to satellite.
Okay.
And just so you, as you may know, right now, we utilize the resorts, the tower that's over here on Agua Fria. And and Chief showed up, so he may be able to speak to this a little bit more. We're talking about the emergency radio tower and the desire to go to satellite technology. And I was explaining to them what you were explaining to me earlier today, the potential conflicts with the new system that Red River is going to be adopting. So I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit more.
I'm informed on it a little bit. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Thanks for letting me speak on this a little bit. So they're going with a Motorola type of system. And my understanding, the Skymira satellite IP25 that I desire to go to isn't gonna integrate into that console system. Now, we could still utilize a standalone system on their dispatch consoles. It would essentially be two different radios. Satellite is the latest and greatest. Digital is a close second to that. And then there's essentially the analog, which is kind of what we're using now. VHF, UHF frequencies, repeaters and that kind of stuff, which yeah, that's been around for a long time. It served its purpose. It's time to move to something better. It's my opinion. The cost per unit, turnkey for handheld and the satellite system in a police or fire apparatus, is gonna be in the ballpark of about $6,500 per unit. So multiply that, that's how many we wanna install that in. And then the function becomes, what will we do for our dispatch center? Or what will the dispatch center do for us to integrate it? And that I don't have the answer to yet.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And then council, one note on number 7, the sports complex. Director Tiblish has budgeted $150,000. It has not been expended, but it is allocated for the sports complex.
And Mr. Mayor and council, in addition to that, I will tell you that, we have, a lot of lodger tax dollars we have to spend. In the last 6 months, our lodger's tax cash position has increased from 2.3 million to 2.8 million. As far as the state statute that requires us to spend this money in a 24-month period, we're actually kind of going backwards. I had this conversation with our auditor. And our auditor does recommend that we look at some large capital expenditures with that money. To make sure that it gets expended and did believe that Allen Fields, the key is, you know, the things we have to spend on, we have to be able to justify that they're gonna participate in bringing people into town and putting heads in beds, which as Director Tiblis will attest, you know, is some of the expansion in that facility we're looking to do would bring in more events to that facility, like softball tournaments, soccer tournaments, and other events that would justify heads in beds and would justify in the auditor's, you know, he's not the final word on this, but in his opinion, would be justifiable for the use of lodgers tax funds.
Well, not only to use lodgers tax funds, but to leverage lodgers tax funds against debt for large. In other words, if we have
Yes.
2.5 million, if we wanted to put $1 million down on a $5 million project, he encouraged us to do so.
That's correct.
Yes.
He thought that the dedication of the lodgers tax fund, since we're bringing in $1 million a year, we brought in a little over $1 million this past year ending June 30th. And we're bringing in $1 million a year. He thought that cash would be a good source to be able to take on debt service that would allow us to expand that facility instead of trying to piecemeal it over, you know, the next several years. He thought it'd be a good thing to take on the debt, get it all in there now. And he felt that
And obviously.
would also
Future.
it
lodgers
actually
tax.
increase the amount of lodgers tax and GRT that we'd be receiving.
And future lodgers tax can be used to service that debt.
That's right, lodgers tax could be dedicated to serve that debt.
Do we have any estimate as to the total cost of what we want to do? Field?
That hasn't gone to plan and design, no. That would be the first step, is getting plan and design done.
So, Councilman, that is exactly what started the conversation with the auditor was, you know, he said, you guys got to start spending this money. We do have an audit finding for having excess lodgers tax. But I said, well, you know, we want to do these projects. But you know, we're not sure if we can use lodger tax, so on, and that's what kind of stemmed this. And so it really came from my question, can I use lodgers tax to do the preliminary engineering? And he said, as long as the projects ultimately end with putting heads in beds and it is an event center. He did make a distinction between things that are for your village. If they're just for your citizens, you can't use lodgers tax. They have to be, their intent has to be to bring people in from out of town, putting heads in beds. And as long as we could justify that, he felt that we could move forward. And by the way, this meeting just happened last week, so we haven't been able to progress on that. But I fully intend to ask Director Tiblis to proceed in preliminary engineering to find out what that's gonna cost. So hopefully within the next month or two, I'll be able to report that to the council.
Sounds good.
Any questions?
Does the Allen Fields eventually include like a volleyball court? I heard somebody say something about volleyball.
It could be included in the plan.
Okay.
But at this time, yeah, there's not even a plan.
We would need to, so we do have a Parks and Rec committee. We would go to them and ask them for direction.
I think, and work with the lodger tax committee as well.
And the lodgers tax committee, we'd have to get them on board. And come up with a plan for expansion. There's talk of a skate park, there's talk of volleyball courts. There's talk of additional soccer fields. I don't know if y'all ever saw the original plan for that. But the original plan for that area was 2 soccer fields and 4 softball diamonds on 2 soccer fields. And so there, we may be looking at something like that. I think this is really the priority, and what should be out there is gonna be
The Icip,
recommended by those two committees to the council, and the council will have a final decision on what's gonna be a priority.
well, the ISAC is listing, lights, bathrooms and concession stands. At this complex.
Right, I was talking about the overall, I mean, the lights, bathrooms and concession stands, regardless of what other activities we add, those are gonna be needed out there to support those activities. Right now, we have no lights, so we can't, it keeps us from doing some tournaments because
Light tournaments.
there's, you know, the tournament, the big tournaments won't come here because you can't play at night. Because they have so many teams that they can't get go through the whole tournament during the daylight hours over a weekend. And the bathrooms and so on, we're having to bring porta potties and we do need water out there, and with concessions, we could even generate a little revenue directly for the village with concessions, and that would help also to bring in larger events where they're looking for these types of things before they'll take on a venue.
Any questions? Andrew, do you have anything on any of the other items? Councilors?
I mean, I stand ready to answer questions on any of these items. I think the little synopsis that Julie gave us, you know, it's short and sweet, but to the point, and talks about, basically reiterates the reasoning that the committee of direct reports and why we ranked them in the manner that we did. I would like to point out that we did rank the ones that had a higher level of health and safety, both to the public and to our staff. Some of these are health and safety related to our staff. That held a higher weight than other things. We really focused on health and safety first.
But this money, like the 400,000 for the fire station is already.
That's how much money we already have.
We already have.
I will tell you on the fire station that the state fire marshal did approve us submitting an additional grant request, because we haven't spent this money yet. For the new fire station. So they did approve an additional, us to apply for an additional $600,000 for the new fire station this year. We're just calling that phase 2. For this fire station to proceed, we need a recommendation from the chief to the council to determine a location. That's the key right now, is where are we gonna put it? With the new chief coming on, I think the interim chief was kind of holding off until the new chief was on board to include them in that process and make sure that they were on board with that decision. So I anticipate our recommendation coming to council in August, certainly first part of September.
Nothing further, this public hearing is closed. We'll reconvene at 2:30 for our council meeting.